Good morning, gents. Uh, Today it's Adam and woman and the tree of knowledge. So let's get into it. I saw Adam created, not in paradise, but in the region in which Jerusalem was subsequently situated. I saw him come forth glittering and white from a mound of yellow earth, as if out of a mold. The sun was shining, and I thought, I was only a child when I saw it, that the sunbeams drew Adam out of the hillock. He was, as it were, born of the virgin earth. God blessed the earth, and it became his mother. He did not instantly step forth from the earth. Some time elapsed before his appearance. He lay in the hillock on his left side, his arm over his head, a light vapor covering him as with a veil. I saw a figure on his right side, and I became conscious that it was Eve, and that she would be drawn from him in paradise by God. God called him, the hillock opened, and Adam stepped gently forth. There were no trees around, only little flowers. I had seen the animals also, coming forth from the earth in a pure singleness, the females separate from the males. And now I saw Adam borne up on high to a garden, to paradise. Adam led all the animals before him in paradise, and he named them. God led all animals before him in paradise, and Adam named them. They followed him and gamboled around him, for all things served him before he sinned. All that he named afterward followed him to earth. Eve had not yet been formed from him. I saw Adam in paradise, among the plants and flowers, and not far from the fountain that played in its center. He was waking as if from sleep. Although his person was more like to flesh than to spirit, yet he was dazzlingly white. He wondered at nothing, nor was he astonished at his own existence. He went around among the trees and the animals, as if he were used to them all, like a man inspecting his fields. Near the tree by the water arose a hill. On it I saw Adam reclining on his left side, his left hand under his cheek. God sent a deep sleep upon him, and he was wrapped in vision. Then from his right side, from the place in which the side of Jesus was opened by the lance, God drew Eve. I saw her small and delicate, but she quickly increased in size until full grown. She was exquisitely beautiful. Were it not for the fall, all would be born in the same way, in tranquil slumber. The hill opened, and at Adam's side rose a crystalline rock, formed apparently of precious stones. At Eve's lay a white valley covered with something like fine white pollen. When Eve had been formed, I saw God give something, or allowed something to flow upon Adam. It was as if there streamed from the Godhead, apparently in human form, currents of light from forehead, mouth, breast, and hands. They united into a globe of light, which entered Adam's right side, whence Eve had been taken. Adam alone received it. It was the germ of God's blessing, which was threefold. The blessing that Abraham received from the angel was one. It was of similar form, but not so luminous. Eve arose before Adam, and he gave her his hand. They were like two unspeakably noble and beautiful children, perfectly luminous, and clothed with beams of light, as from a veil. From Adam's mouth I saw issuing a broad stream of glittering light, and upon his forehead was an expression of great majesty. Around his mouth around his mouth played a sunbeam, but there was none around Eve's. I saw Adam's heart very much the same as in men the present day, but his breast was surrounded by rays of light. In the middle of his heart I saw a sparkling halo of glory. In it was a tiny figure as if holding something in its hand. I think it symbolized the third person of the Godhead. From the hands and feet of Adam and Eve shot rays of light. Their hair fell in 5 glittering tresses, 2 from the temples, 2 behind the ears, and 1 from the back of the head. I have always thought that by the wounds Jesus there were opened anew in the human body portals closed by Adam's sin. I've been given to understand that Longinus opened in Jesus' side the gate of regeneration to eternal life. Therefore, no one entered heaven while that gate was closed. Longinus obviously must be the centurion that pierced him with the spear. The glittering beams on Adam's head denoted his abundant fruitfulness, his glory, his connection with other radiations. And all this shining beauty is restored to glorified souls and bodies. Our hair is the ruined, the extinct glory, and as is this hair of our 2 rays of light, is our present flesh to that of Adam before the fall. The sunbeams around Adam's mouth bore reference to a holy posterity from God, which, had it not been for the fall, would have been effectuated by the spoken word. Adam stretched forth his hand to Eve. They left the charming spot of Eve's creation and went through paradise, looking at everything, rejoicing in everything. That place was the highest in paradise. All was more radiant, more resplendent there than elsewhere. Subtext: the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. In the center of the glittering garden, I saw a sheet of water in which lay an island connected with the opposite land by a pier. Both island and pier were covered with beautiful trees, but in the middle of the former stood one more magnificent than the others. It towered high over them as if guarding them. Its roots extended over the whole island, as did its branches, which were broad and below, and tapering to a point above. Its boughs were horizontal, and from there arose others like little trees. The leaves were fine, the fruit yellow and sessile, in a leafy calyx like a budding rose. It was something like a cedar. I do not remember ever having seen Adam, Eve, or any animal near that tree on the island, but I saw beautiful, noble-looking white birds and heard them singing in its branches. That tree was the tree of life. Just before the pier that led to the island stood the tree of knowledge. The trunk was scaly like that of the palm. The leaves, which spread out directly from the stem, were very large and broad and shaped like the sole of a shoe. Hidden in the forepart of the leaves hung the fruit clustering in 5s, 1 in front and 4 around the stem. The yellow fruit had something of the shape of an apple, though more of the nature of a pear or fig. It had 5 ribs united in a little cavity. It was pulpy like a fig inside, of the color of brown sugar, and streaked with blood-red veins. The tree was broader above than below, and its branches stuck deep roots into the ground. I see a species of this tree still in warm countries. Its branches throw down shoots to earth where they root and rise as new trunks. These in turn send forth branches, and so one such tree often covers a tract of country, a large tract of country. Whole families dwell under the dense foliage. At some distance to the right of the tree of knowledge, I saw a small, oval, gently sloping hill of glittering red grains and all kinds of precious stones. It was terraced with crystals. Around it were slender trees just high enough to intercept the view. Plants and herbs grew around it, and they, like the trees, bore colored blossoms and nutritious fruits. At some distance to the left of the tree of knowledge, I saw a slope, a little dale. It looked like a soft clay or like mist. It was covered with tiny little white flowers and pollen. Here, too, were various kinds of vegetation, but all colorless, more like pollen and fruit. And it seemed as if these two, the hill and the dale, bore some reference to each other, as if the hill had been taken out of the dale, or as if something from the former was to be transplanted into the latter. They were to each other what the seed is to the field. Both seemed to me holy, and I saw that both, but especially the hill, shone with light. Between them and the tree of knowledge arose different kinds of trees and bushes. They were all like everything else in nature, transparent as if formed of light. These two places were the abodes of our first parents. The tree of knowledge separated them. I think that God, after the creation of Eve, pointed out these two places to them. I saw that Adam and Eve were little together at first. I saw them perfectly free of passion, each in a separate abode. The animals were indescribably noble looking and resplendent, and they served Adam and Eve. All had, according to their kind, received certain retreats. All had, according to their kind, certain retreats, abodes, and walks apart. The different spheres contained in themselves some great mystery of the divine law, and all were connected with one another. And that concludes the reading. All right, so first note. When Adam was created, he was created in the quote-unquote region of Jerusalem. Now, she says that the earth wasn't like really mountainous like it is now, but it was more just hilly. So I guess there's a special significance to Jerusalem. Actually, she goes on to mention later that I don't know if maybe it's her that does this, but the Adam's bones were buried at the place of the skull of Golgotha, and that when Jesus was crucified, it represented the redemption of Adam in many ways. Anyways, the thing about it is he's born there, but then he floats up to the sky in these islands in the sky called paradise, and that's an extreme mystery. Next, his lying on his left side, it kind of connects us to this idea that the left represents gravitation towards the flesh, and the right represents the side of us that is oriented towards God, like the spirit. So it's not completely a trope in the Bible, because when you're walking a quote-unquote straight path, you sway neither to the left nor to the right. So take from that what you will. Okay, next thing. I saw this once in I used to watch a show called What Catholics Believe, and somebody said on there that when Adam, and this resonated with me, when Adam named everything, he named according to the fact that he was dominant over them. This is why God doesn't have a name. People who call him like Yahweh, they're just calling him I am in Hebrew. And he just said, tell them I am sent me. The reason why he doesn't have a name is because there's nobody above him. He's the Most High. Well, Adam has a name because God is above Adam. And Adam names the creatures because Adam's above the creatures. Well, she continually references this woman as Eve. But Adam only names Eve after the fall. Before the fall, when Eve was brought before him, that is the woman, he called her, this is woman, for she is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones. He did not call her Eve. It was after the fall when God said, and man shall have dominion over thee. It allowed him, it forced him to give her a name, because now she was no longer something like his equal, but she was his lesser. Now keep this in mind when Jesus calls women woman. It may be that he's calling them woman because of this precise thing. And he calls Mary woman twice in the Gospel of John. Woman, what has this to do with me? My hour is not yet come. Woman, behold thy son. However, he also calls the woman in John 8, 1-11, a woman. So it doesn't necessarily mean that universally, but perhaps he always called Mary woman in a very affectionate way, as if to say she is redeemed. Next note. In Mystical City of God, she actually says, and this makes a lot of sense, that when Mary was formed in the womb of Saint Anne, that she was given the woman's genetics, that is Eve's genetics, so that Mary came out basically a clone of Eve, and Jesus was given Adam's sort of genetics, and he came out a clone of Adam. So it's reasonable to think that yes, Adam and Eve look like Jesus and Mary, and Jesus and Mary would fulfill the trope of being the new Adam and Eve. Now she says, our hair is the ruined, the extinct glory, and as is the hair of ours to rays of light, so is our present flesh to that of Adam before the fall. I found this extremely interesting because one time I had a dream that I was looking at myself in the mirror, except that the image I saw in the mirror was me, but I wasn't like my usual ugly self. I was actually symmetrical, and I had a full head of hair, and that hair was like nice and flowing and soft, right? I was handsome. I was like, it was like the way I should have looked rather than the way I currently look. Now, I heard once that, and it sounds good, it makes sense, that our guardian angels often take on a look to look like us, but in a more perfected form. And sometimes I've wondered whether I was staring at myself or as a perfect form, or staring at my guardian angel in the mirror. And that's to me just a mystery to contemplate. Now, one thing I find interesting about the animals and the plant life is she said they were given more like perfect form, and this was in the previous video. They were given more like a perfect form, like all of them were in accordance with the way. And the fall of man, the fall of Adam, did not just involve him, but it involved all the animals and plants as well. They became sort of deformed. So we're in the flesh today, and I would almost say we're more flesh than spirit, and especially the animals. They took a lot of the damage there. Whereas every animal probably has a noble purpose to mankind, but that noble purpose was long forgotten because of man's fall. So we have some noble animals like the horse and the dog and some cats and whatnot, but then a lot of animals are now wild. Wild and noble is an important dichotomy for even a child to learn. When something is noble, it serves whatever is higher than itself. When something is wild, it refuses to serve what is higher than itself. This is extremely important distinction in Catholicism, because when we submit to the church and when we submit to the will of God, we're being noble. But if we fail to submit to these things, then we're being wild. Now, one of the greatest distinctions between noble animals and wild animals is noble animals often congregate in herds. This is not universally true, but this is often true. Even pigeons used to serve mankind. They used to be couriers. And mankind sort of abandoned them, and they became sort of domesticated in cities. You go around cities, you'll see hundreds of pigeons on any given walk you have. They flock around cities. They wander around. Pigeons have somewhat of a noble nature. It just gives new meaning to what Christ said in Matthew 24, that the love of many will grow cold. That in times of real calamity, mankind is going to get very isolated from one another. They're going to lose this ability to flock. Right now they flock, but then their differences will eventually just pry them all apart because they lost their noble nature. And one last note is a curiosity that I'm sure a lot of people must have, including myself in a little bit. You might ask, why would God make the tree of the knowledge of good and evil available to Adam and woman in the paradise? Like, why would he allow them to be able to fall? And it's like the question of, why is there evil in the world? But obviously we have to know that the devil exists. And God plans on telling them the devil exists and the fall of angels happened, but he wants to do it on his own time when they're ready for it. And I once made the comparison of sex. Sex, when introduced to children, is extremely bad. It disorders them. But when introduced to them as an adult, can help bond marriages together, like make them nice and strong, like glue, like a really powerful glue. But you can glue yourself to random objects rather than to something that's useful to you. And so that's why the tree of the knowledge of good and evil obviously had a purpose, but we don't know it because it was misused, because it was given to them to eat before they were ready to eat it, and therefore they became deformed. Anyways, I have a lot more to say, but I'll say them following the other readings we do, that I do, whatever. So that's it. Ave Maria.